I have news that some of you won't like. You are either already moving toward success or slowly, almost imperceptibly, heading toward failure. And it's not your education, not the economy, and not even the number of friends in your phone book that decides it. What decides it is what you do when no one is watching. What decides it is discipline. It either lifts you to the top or drags you down into the abyss through its absence. And if you listen until the end, I will give you a method that will make discipline work for you, even when you're not in the mood. Have you ever wondered why some people soar upward as if lifted by the wind, while others seem to wander through life in a fog, stumbling over the same stones again and again? Why do two people start together, yet after a few years their lives become impossible to compare? I was asking myself these questions back when the only thing jingling in my pocket was loose change, and the only thing in my head was a dream. Face the truth. Is there at least one area of your life today where you can honestly say, I am completely satisfied? Now ask yourself another question. If nothing changes in that area over the next 5 years, could you live with that? This is where the conversation about discipline begins. Not the harsh, cold kind like a drill sergeant on the parade ground, but the kind that quietly and stubbornly shapes your future every single day. Discipline is not about tormenting yourself. It's about taking control of the most valuable thing you have, your hours, your days, your life, because either you control them or they control you. I remember standing at a crossroads at the age of 25. I wanted everything: money, confidence, freedom. But to be honest, I wanted results without paying the price, victories without training, a harvest without planting. And that's when I first heard a phrase that turned everything upside down. For every disciplined effort, there are multiple rewards. It stuck in my mind. I realized the world doesn't pay for wishes. It pays for action, and it pays generously, but only to those willing to pay in advance in the currency of discipline. Let me ask you a direct question. What do you do with the first hours of your day? Do you open a book or your phone? Do you build a plan or put out fires? Do you feed your dream or feed your habits? Because every morning you're either planting seeds or giving weeds space to grow. And believe me, life always rewards planning, but it also rewards neglect, just in a very different way. Discipline is a choice, and you make that choice not once a year, not once a month, but every hour. To get up or lie down for 5 more minutes, to tell the truth or lie for convenience, to read 3 pages or watch 1 more video. And while each choice may seem small, together they shape your tomorrow. Be honest, how many times have you known exactly what you needed to do but didn't do it? And what did it cost you? Maybe a lost opportunity, a broken relationship, money you never earned, a weakened character. And here's the key. Each of those moments wasn't so much a failure of action as it was a lack of discipline. I want you today to look at your life without sugarcoating, not as you wish it were, but as it truly is. Because until you admit where you are now, you cannot decide where to go next. And discipline here is not a prison guard, it's a compass. It doesn't restrict you, it frees you. It frees you from chaos, from randomness, from the we'll see what happens kind of life. And know this, discipline always works both ways. If you're disciplined in avoiding effort, you'll still reap a harvest, you just won't like it. If you're disciplined in postponing your dream, you're also disciplined in building disappointment. Today I want to challenge you. Listen not just with your ears, but with your heart. Remember all those moments when you were just a hair's breadth away from success, but something inside made you say, tomorrow. Remember how tomorrow became never. And promise yourself today we break that. Because at the end of this conversation, I'm going to give you a simple, almost laughable looking practice. But if you take it and do it day after day, it will break old habits, change your pace, and within a year you won't recognize yourself. Let's start with the simplest yet harshest question my mentor Earl Schaff once asked me. Jim, why are you not yet where you want to be? I began making excuses. The company pays too little. The economy is tough. There are no opportunities. But he looked me straight in the eye and said, that's not the whole truth. That's just what the company pays you. And that phrase hit like an arrow, because it stripped away my usual shield of excuses and forced me to look in the mirror. This is where discipline begins, in the moment when you stop shifting responsibility and admit, your results are your creation. You shape them with your habits, your pace, your daily discipline, or your lack of it. Think about it right now. Is there an area of your life where you haven't seen progress in a long time? Maybe it's finances, maybe health, maybe relationships. You're doing something, but it feels like you're stuck in place. And here's the truth: discipline in that area is either minimal or chaotic. Life is like a field. If you sow irregularly, the harvest will be unpredictable. My mentor used to say, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. At first, I didn't understand that. I was hardworking, arriving early, staying late. But for years, I stayed at the same level. Why? Because I worked on my job, not on myself. Discipline starts not with hours in the office, but with the hours you spend on your own growth reading, learning new skills, strengthening your character. Now imagine doing this every day, even when there's no time or you're not in the mood. It's like drops of water wearing down stone. The result doesn't come overnight, but after a month, 3 months, a year, you are a completely different person. And that new person attracts different opportunities, different connections, a different level of income. I know you've heard the advice, be consistent, but let me be frank, most people confuse consistency with repeating the old. They are disciplined in doing the same thing and disciplined in getting the same results. True discipline is consistency in the right actions that move you forward, not the ones that keep you in place. Let's run a micro experiment. Think back to this morning. How many of your actions were planned and useful for your goals, and how many just happened out of inertia? Every minute without a plan is an invitation to chaos. Discipline begins where you decide, I control my hour. And here's one of the strongest metaphors I've ever heard. Your life is a garden. If you plant seeds of knowledge, action, and gratitude every day, your garden will bloom. If you leave it unattended, weeds of negativity, fear, and harmful habits will fill every inch. And you know what? Nature abhors a vacuum. If you don't fill your time and mind with the right actions, something else will fill them. People often ask me, Jim, how do you motivate yourself to be disciplined? And I always say, don't rely on motivation. It comes and goes like the wind. Rely on a system. If you wait for inspiration to act, you lose. But if you have habits that trigger action automatically, even when you're not in the mood, you win. Look at athletes, musicians, great entrepreneurs. Do you think they wake up every day wanting to work? Absolutely not. But they wake up with a schedule, and discipline beats mood. Now imagine for a moment that you start living by this principle. Not when I have time, not when I feel like it, but today. You introduce one small disciplined effort and you do it every day. After a week, you notice it's easier. After a month, it's a habit. After a year, it's transformed your life. But, and this is important, discipline only works if it's yours. Not imposed by others, not driven by fear, but chosen consciously. The most valuable discipline is the one you impose on yourself voluntarily, because it doesn't just change your actions, it changes your identity. So, the first aspect of discipline I want you to remember today is this. Discipline begins with responsibility. The moment you acknowledge that your life is the product of your decisions, you stop waiting, you start acting. And then the law for every disciplined effort, there are multiple rewards starts working for you, not against you. And know this is only the beginning. Because next I'll talk about the second aspect, which is no less important. How to keep discipline when the first emotions fade, when enthusiasm evaporates, and all that's left is you and your decision. But more on that in a moment. Here's the paradox. Most people think discipline is a short sprint, a series of bursts after which you can rest. But true discipline is a marathon. It's not so much about starting fast as it is about not stopping when the first fireworks of emotion have faded. I remember a story from my early career. I met a man who, in his first 3 months in business, made an incredible leap, sales, connections, energy. Everyone around saw him as a future legend. But a year later, he was gone. Why? Because he lived on enthusiasm, not discipline. Enthusiasm lifted him into the air, but discipline should have kept him moving. It wasn't there, and he fell. Now ask yourself, how many times have you started something new with great excitement, only for it to quietly disappear? Maybe it was a diet, a new project, a business, learning a language. You were inspired, but then the ordinary days came. And this is where the real separation happens. Because motivation is like festive lights, bright but short-lived. Discipline is like the sun. It rises every day, even when there are clouds. I like to say discipline is the bridge between intention and result. Intention without discipline is just a wish. Discipline without intention is aimless routine. But when they meet, you create a system that moves you forward no matter what happens around you. Look at any great career from athletes to scientists. You'll see years when they worked in silence, when no one applauded, when results weren't obvious. That is the real test. Can you keep investing when the world hasn't yet paid you dividends? Can you maintain your pace when the fruit isn't ripe? This is where the second aspect of discipline comes in. Endurance in the small things. You can't hold on to a big goal if you haven't learned to keep small commitments. As Earl Schaff told me, don't seek big success until you've learned to tend a small garden. Here's an example from my life. I once decided to read at least 10 pages of a book every day. Not much, right? But in a year, that's over 3,600 pages, dozens of books that shaped my thinking, my business, my life. And it didn't start with, I'll read for 3 hours. It started with 10 pages, no exceptions. Small steps, done with discipline, become giant leaps in the end. Now I want you to think, what small actions could you start tomorrow? Not the ones requiring radical change, but the ones you can weave into your day without breaking your system. Because discipline is not about strain, it's about regularity. And regularity builds inner strength. One more thing worth saying plainly. Discipline walks hand in hand with self-respect. Every time you make a promise to yourself and keep it, you raise your value in your own eyes. You start trusting yourself. And self-trust is a currency with a higher exchange rate than money, because when you believe you can handle it, you take on more. On the other hand, every time you promise yourself and don't follow through, you damage that trust. It's like a hole in a bucket. It might still look strong and beautiful, but it won't hold water. So let's do a quick reset of your attention. Ask yourself right now, what promises have you broken recently? And what has that cost you in inner confidence? Here's another important point. People often think discipline limits freedom. In truth, it's the opposite. Discipline is the greatest accelerator of freedom. If you're disciplined in finances, you're free from debt and money stress. If you're disciplined in health, you're free from most illness and physical limitation. If you're disciplined in relationships, you're free from chaos and mistrust. I like to say, discipline is the guardian of your dreams. Without it, your dreams are exposed to every wind of doubt, temptation, and distraction. With it, they're protected until they're ready. And here's one more image to keep in mind. Imagine building a bridge. At first, it's just a pile of metal and concrete, but day after day, bolt by bolt, slab by slab, the chaos begins to take shape, and one day the bridge is complete and you can cross to the other side. Discipline is the daily tightening of bolts in your life. Without it, you'll never cross the gap between your present and your future. So let's sum up the second aspect. True discipline lives in endurance and small things. It's in doing the right thing even when no one's watching. It's in keeping small commitments because they train the muscles for big ones. It's in living not just for today, but for tomorrow. And once we understand that, we're ready for the next step. Because there's yet another third aspect of discipline that often stays in the shadows. It's the moment when discipline stops being effort and becomes part of your identity. When you no longer force yourself to act, you just act, because that's who you are. And that's what we'll talk about next. Let me tell you plainly, at some point, discipline stops being a foreign word and becomes your second name. You no longer ask yourself, should I do this? Do I want to do this? You just do it because anything else would no longer be you. This is the moment when discipline becomes part of your identity. Think for a minute. Who are you when no one is watching? Not on social media, not in meetings, not with friends, but alone with yourself. Do you keep the promises you've made to yourself when there are no witnesses? Do you keep your word when the only person who can check is you? Because here's the truth. The discipline you keep in silence builds loud results in the spotlight. I remember that early in my career, I often relied on outside accountability. If a meeting was scheduled, I showed up. If someone was waiting, I delivered. But the moment the external oversight was gone, my productivity melted away. This went on until I realized the real breakthrough would only come when I became my own coach, my own mentor, my own supervisor. And here's a question that could change your life. Can you make yourself do what's necessary when no one will punish you for inaction? Because this is the moment when what I call the inner contract is formed. It's an agreement with yourself that regardless of weather, mood, or circumstances, you will act. And this contract is the most valuable document in your life, even if it's never signed in ink. Now let me pause and ask you, if we removed all your external deadlines, mentors, and reminders, could you keep going or would you stop? This isn't a question about comfort, it's a question about power. Because when discipline becomes part of you, you no longer depend on external forces. I remember once meeting an old farmer back in Idaho where I grew up. He looked at his field and said, "I don't wait for someone to remind me to plant. If I miss planting season, no one will punish me tomorrow, but a few months from now, I'll punish myself with an empty barn." And I realized our lives are the same field. You either sow discipline on time or you face an empty harvest later. Friends, let me be direct. Life doesn't wait, and it doesn't remind you. If you don't learn to act without a signal, you'll miss the most important moments. Opportunities don't knock twice. They come quietly, like dawn, and they leave if you're asleep. Now let's go deeper. Why do you even want to be disciplined? To earn more? To look better? That's fine, but it's surface level. The real reason is dignity. When you know you can rely on yourself, it creates a foundation on which you can build anything. Let me ask you directly, when was the last time you felt proud, not because someone praised you, but because you did what you promised yourself? Do you remember that quiet after defeating your own laziness? That moment when you told no one but felt a light burning inside? That is the real reward of discipline. And one more thing, discipline is not only about doing what's necessary, it's also about refusing what drags you down. It's the ability to say no, even when yes seems easier. It's rejecting short-term pleasures for long-term victories. Ask yourself, what are you willing to give up for your future? An extra hour in front of a screen? Meetings that drain your energy? The words, "I'm not in the mood"? Because every no to something useless is a yes to something that builds you. Now imagine living 1, 2, 5 years with this kind of inner discipline. Who would you become? What would your body, your bank account, your influence, your inner peace look like? I want you to feel it right now. Close your eyes for a second and see yourself as the person who already has that discipline. How do you walk? How do you speak? How do you look in the mirror? Feel that strength in every cell, because here's what I know for sure. You will either be an example of what discipline can make of a person or a warning of what happens without it. And the choice is made today. This third aspect, discipline as part of your identity, is when you stop holding yourself together and start living in a way that anything else is simply impossible. It's when discipline is no longer a burden, but part of your DNA. And now that we've walked this road together from responsibility through endurance in the small things to inner identity, it's time to take one more step. In the next part, I'll give you a concrete tool to lock in this discipline and move it from the level of ideas to the level of daily practice. Friends, we've already talked a lot about discipline, but now it's time to look in the mirror and not at your face, but deeper, into your habits, into your decisions. Because words without a reality check are just a nice conversation. I want you to take a small test right now, on the spot. Don't write anything down, just answer in your head. And answer honestly, not for me, for yourself. For each question, rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 means this is not me at all, and 10 means this is absolutely me. Ready? Let's begin. First question, how much do you trust yourself to keep the promises you make to yourself? Imagine you're hiring someone who will do everything they promise. Would you hire yourself? If yes, congratulations. That's the foundation of discipline. If no, you know where to start. Second question, how often do you do what needs to be done even when you're not in the mood? Remember, storm or sunshine, a real captain still steers the ship into port. If your mood is your rudder, then the sea of life will toss you wherever it wants. Third question, are you able to give up short-term pleasure for a long-term goal? Think of your life like building a house. You can buy pretty but fragile tiles now, or wait and get the kind that will last decades. Are you building something temporary or something lasting? Fourth question, do you plan your day and stick to that plan? A plan isn't chains, it's a map. Without a map, you can walk for years and never arrive. If your day is dictated by random events, don't be surprised when your results are random too. Fifth question, can you start again after a setback? Because discipline isn't perfection, it's the ability to get back up. If you fall but get back on course the next day, you're still in the game. If you fall and abandon the course, the game's over. Remember, this test isn't a verdict, it's a mirror. If you've just noticed some low scores, that's not a reason for guilt, it's an opportunity for growth. And now, as promised, here's a simple but powerful tool. I call it the 3 wins rule. The idea is this: every day you choose 3 small wins you will absolutely achieve no matter what. They can be anything that moves you toward your goal: 20 minutes of reading, a workout, an important conversation, work on a project. The key is that they're clear and achievable. Why 3? Because it's small enough not to overload you, but enough to create momentum. And if you do these 3 wins daily, you create a snowball effect. Small steps, done consistently, turn into huge leaps over time. Here's the crucial part. Even if the day goes completely off track, get your 3 wins done. It gives you a sense of control and keeps your discipline alive. You know, I don't promise magic buttons, but I've seen this simple method change lives from students to business owners, from athletes to parents. Because it makes discipline part of your daily reality, not just another idea. So when we talk about discipline, remember, it's not about strictness for its own sake. It's about freedom. Freedom from chaos, from debt, from illness, from doubt. And that freedom begins with being willing to take small steps every single day, even when the world shouts, rest, relax, you can do it later. That's why I want you after this to go back to those 5 questions. Write them down, rate yourself honestly, then see where you can raise your score by just 1 point in the next week. Not by 10, not by 5, by 1. Because discipline grows gradually, like a muscle. And one more thing, if this was helpful, share it. Like it, and comment with which of the 5 scores was your lowest, and what small action you'll take to raise it. Because when you speak your intentions out loud, you create an extra layer of accountability. Remember, life doesn't reward intentions, it rewards actions. And your discipline is the ticket to the life you want. Friends, we began this conversation with a simple but uncompromising truth. Discipline is the key to everything you want. And now, after all the stories, examples, and questions, I want you to leave this moment with a clear decision. Not a mood, not inspiration, a decision. Because the world doesn't ask what you planned, it asks, what did you do? And if you want a different life, you need different actions, different habits, different discipline. People often ask me, Jim, where do I start? And I always answer, start with yourself. Not with the economy, not with the government, not with family or friends. Start with what you can control right now, your hours, your decisions, your promises to yourself. Remember, you will either be an example of what discipline can do or a warning of what happens without it. And this choice is made daily, sometimes several times a day. Right now, you may have a dream that's been waiting for you for years. And maybe the only reason it hasn't become reality isn't a lack of talent or connections, it's a lack of consistent discipline. If that's true, then today could be the day you break that pattern. You can start small, with 1 small win. But start, because every day you delay is another day you strengthen old habits. And every day you act is another brick in the foundation of your new life. Here's my final challenge to you. Picture yourself in 5 years if you start today, and picture yourself in 5 years if you don't. 2 completely different lives, 2 completely different yous. And only you decide which one becomes reality. So leave here not just with thoughts, but with a decision. And remember my words. For every disciplined effort, there are multiple rewards. Start sowing today, and you will reap tomorrow.